Welcome to the Dr. Broadway Podcast, the musical theater history podcast where a couple of doctors sit around and talk about Broadway. Tracey, today we're back at that addendum to season 2. Mm-hmm. And what are we talking about?
Today we're looking at Beetlejuice. So for all of our Gen X fans, we're doing that again. We get to stop and talk about our childhood for a minute.
Yes.
And talk about just how weird it is. Because let's be honest, Beetlejuice, one of the wide-ranging topics that, came out during... Like, what were these movies that we
that's a great question.
And we made iconic,
I know.
I'm not really sure.
It is a great question because if Beetlejuice had been made prior to VCRs, right? Prior to 24-hour cable movie channels like HBO.
Yeah.
Would it have been just any other B movie like Attack of the Killer Cockroaches or whatever?
Exactly.
Could it have been that if it didn't have, we talk about how there were technologies in place that helped Oklahoma to launch a golden age. Were there technologies in place that helped movies like Beetlejuice to remain in the zeitgeist like it did?
I think there's just a whole bunch of them in that era that
are
a little weird. But it's all these little boys growing up on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the like. There was a specific kind of humor in that era that obviously as a younger Gen X, I'm more the like Zennial in that weird Zennial phase. Mm-hmm. As one of those, I never quite got the rage of these movies that my older counterparts did, but they loved them.
They loved them. And I do remember seeing Beetlejuice the movie at the theater.
Are you serious?
I did. I do remember seeing it, and it definitely did not. It was not Annie for me.
No, this will not be a 2-hour episode. We'll be okay.
No. It was fine. Subsequently, of course, I think I saw more clips of it than seeing the movie again because it's in every iconic film reel that you see. Mm-hmm. You see something from Beetlejuice. Yeah. So, it was
only a matter of time. If we're gonna have Back to the Future, we're gonna have Beetlejuice.
Absolutely.
There are just a couple that we still haven't done on the musical theater stage that I'm sure they're coming. I'm sure somebody's working on them.
Without question.
So then let's look at the musical itself. It premieres in 2019. Yeah. Unlucky. Does does pretty well, and then gets shut down in 2020 for
that's right
the pandemic. It comes back and actually does go back up when the theaters are opened again. Yep. And then closes, and it closes that time because there is another musical that's waiting for their spot.
Yeah, the first time that was the Music Man.
Kicked out. Yeah, so they get kicked out of there, and then it comes back again in 2025 on a little bit of a controversial run on Broadway, where we have the touring company that's been touring the United States. So if you're seeing this on tour, these are the guys you're seeing. Yeah. They came through and did Broadway as a tour stop. And Kim Sava, who we've talked to on the podcast before. She came on with her husband, Michael Jablonski, a few weeks ago to talk about actor pay and kind of how all of that gets taken care of. Kim Sava was in the original company of Beetlejuice on Broadway.
That's right.
In 2019. And then, I think I have at least one, maybe two. Maybe just one. One former student who made it all the way to Broadway with the touring cast and actually got to play Lydia, got to play the lead.
Oh, wow.
And, did an incredible job. So, been watching Beetlejuice make its way across the country, but it is, if there was ever a little engine that could, this is it.
Oh, without question.
It just keeps reinventing itself without actually changing anything.
Which is kind of appropriate. Another thing that's appropriate for Beetlejuice, I was thinking as I was pulling together my notes for this recording, was how a lot of what we'll have to say really has to do with the afterlife of Beetlejuice, which is appropriate for Beetlejuice, about a poltergeist, right? Yeah. Because it is so unusual, the fact that it opens on Broadway in 2019 and then is kicked off. I mean, the Schubert organization tells them they've got to vacate the Winter Garden in June of 2020. Well, little did they know that everybody would be vacating their theaters in March of 2020.
Yeah.
But then it is truly back by popular demand. I mean, it was fan frenzy that brought this show back from the dead.
They didn't think it was going to go as well.
That's right.
They didn't see this happening. And so there was like a limited run, and they took it. And then there was so much popularity. So then we bring it back. And it's a little crazy, isn't it?
It is wild. And then again, it's been on Broadway 3 distinct times.
I know.
All the same production.
I know.
So they've never been, it's not like it's qualified for awards again. It's not a revival. It's the same production, but it's 3 distinct companies, although I'm sure there's been some overlap.
There is overlap, but not.
Yeah.
I mean, not tons. You look at, Kim Sava, who did the 2019. In 2020, she was down with me in oh gosh, in North Georgia. So when the 2022, I remember her saying they asked me to come back, but I'm trying to have a baby and I'm trying to do all of these other things.
Changed.
This is 2 years later. My life has changed quite a bit, and I guess I could go back, but that would be abandoning all of these things that I did during the pandemic. So it's a really it's a very, very interesting thing. Yeah, to kind of see how the production has grown and changed. But yeah, it's interesting. So let's get into it. We'll start, of course, by talking very briefly about the film. And I say very briefly because I think it needs no introduction, like I said. And like you said, every person knows this film, whether or not they've seen it, the film. And so I'm actually going to start, the film comes out in 1998. I'm actually going to start at 1988, pardon me. I'm actually going to back it up just a couple years to 1985 because that was the year that director Tim Burton, who directed Beetlejuice, made his film debut. Tim Burton had been directing since the early 70s, but they'd all been short films, basically television episode kind of things. And it was in 1985 that he was able to direct a full feature film. That, of course, was Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And though I may not have been all aboard the Beetlejuice train, let me just tell you how I was locked and loaded on the Pee-wee's Big Adventure bus. Can I just say,
all in.
The Zennials, you get either or, right? You get people like you who's like, oh my gosh, I love this.
It.
This was
love 100%, everything about it.
Yeah. And then people like me, I remember watching it and being like, there's something wrong with this man. I distinctly remember thinking that.
Yes.
And I was like 7. I was like, he's not okay.
This is not normal. This is not normal.
I mean, we never really watched it because apparently I would sit there the whole time and go, furrow my brow like, I don't understand what is happening.
It's very difficult to make sense of it because there's some things, obviously he's an adult man and the counterparts are adults, right? So he's very childlike, but even those like Francis, the guy who he thinks steals his bike, the son of the very rich man, he's a full grown adult too, playing a very juvenile character, right? So it's very tricky to make sense of, but I ate it up. And then, of course, when Pee-wee's Pee-wee's Playhouse came along, you best believe I did not miss that, nor did I miss a chance. Oh, yeah, cherry. I would have given anything to have a cherry in my house.
And I was terrified. I just remember being like, now I'm afraid to sit in chairs. This is what Pee-wee did to me. So very, very different responses to this kind of humor.
I know. I loved it. I ate it up. But it was Pee-wee's Big Adventure that was Burton's first feature film as a director. And so, of course, after that, he's looking around for what's next, and he's really feeling very frustrated as a filmmaker, because if you know Pee-wee, and certainly if you know Tim Burton's later work, has a very distinct aesthetic. And yet he felt very much pressured to make traditional Hollywood films. But he also knew himself well enough to know he was not a traditional Hollywood filmmaker.
No,
right?
He likes the weird stuff.
He likes the weird stuff, right? And he's done, if you think about, you gotta have a gimmick, he's really made it pay. He has made that gimmick pay for him.
In his later career, he's the one that directs the movie version of Sweeney Todd.
Sweeney Todd, that's right. That's exactly right.
I took my dad to that, and on the way home, it went silent, and he said to me, he goes, I thought you were taking me to a musical, not a horror film. And I went, it is not supposed to be like that. I was so just like, I didn't know what I was walking into.
Yeah. Well, that's Tim Burton.
That's Tim Burton in a nutshell. Musical, not horror film.
That is Tim Burton for you. And so after Pee-wee, he's looking for something. He's feeling pressured to come out with his next film, but he's also feeling like they want me to make something that looks like every other film, and I don't want to make it. That's when he comes across the script for Beetlejuice. And as you can imagine, he reads Beetlejuice and he thinks this is anything but a traditional Hollywood film. And so he signs on to direct. I'm not going to go real deeply into Beetlejuice because, like I said, I'm taking for granted that people who are listening to this are at least familiar enough to know what it's about and how it's so firmly lodged into the lore of the culture. But basically, it's a film that premieres in 1988. It's about this ghost, basically poltergeist, who won't leave these people and their home in particular alone, right? The ghost or the poltergeist is played by Michael Keaton. Beetlejuice is Michael Keaton. Of course, the film also stars Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis as the owners of the home. Yeah. As the owners of the home that Beetlejuice is that he is taken with. And then we've got Winona Ryder and Catherine O'Hara. I mean, it just goes on and on. It was a massive, very popular cast. Even though they were on the younger side of their careers, names like Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis, this was not a career maker. These people were already down the road, right? With their careers. It's fun
now to go back and go, oh
yeah, exactly. But my point being, it's not like he took no names and launched them. I mean, these people already were known, right? Yeah. So the film is made with a $15 million budget and makes about $75 million worldwide. And so it was a big hit. And then, like I said, courtesy of VCRs and HBO and Cinemax, this is available to rent or to watch
at the very
pretty much whenever you want.
And this is the big, first big push of video. The video store.
Yes. Yeah. So we talked about with Annie how there was the VCR, and that was early 80s. But by the, later 80s, you begin to have the infrastructure for the video industry, right? So big video takes over by the late 80s. And certainly, exactly. And it was such a huge part. Gen Xers and Zennials talk about this all the time. What a huge part of our life it was on a Friday night to get a pizza and rent a movie. How big a deal was that? Friends are coming over. Friends are coming over. We're going to go in where I grew up and lived in Anderson, South Carolina. We had Pick-a-Flick video. We'd go to Pick-a-Flick and we'd get the Little Caesars. What was it called? Yeah, it was called Pizza. Yeah, pizza. The cardboard box.
Yeah.
We'd get the pizza and then go to Pick-a-Flick, and boy, that was it. That was the height of sophistication.
Video Valley. That was ours.
That's nice.
Yeah, Video Valley. And Video Valley started as a very tiny store, and all of a sudden it grew and grew and took over the next door neighbors. Then until it filled the entire strip mall.
Yeah,
that's what I watched it grow from. Growing up and being
that makes sense. That makes sense. So this is right there in that moment. This is where this film hits. And then, of course, on its heels, Burton now no longer has to worry that people expect him to make traditional Hollywood films. No, he has a very specific style, and boy, do people love it. So that's next we get Batman, starring again Michael Keaton as Batman, which really was the first of the resurgence of the superhero films, right? I know certainly there had been a whole bunch of them early on, but this was
that.
Yeah, I know. But when you watch it, you can see.
Yeah, you can totally see it. Like, just Michael Keaton's voice in that, and the big joke behind it. It's always like, I mean, you get it, but at the same time, it's like, do you realize what this spawned later on?
I know. Well, the other thing, gosh, this is a rabbit trail, but surprise, surprise.
What we do.
But you know what? I remember I was in 6th grade, I believe, when that Batman came out, and I wasn't even into superheroes, but you best believe I went to see that movie, because remember that Batman icon was used so effectively for marketing.
It's kind of like the Phantom Mask that's happening at the same time.
Perfect. Yes, exactly.
It was just the Batman. It was
an icon.
The bat signal kind of thing.
That's right. That's exactly right. It was, that would be the only thing on the billboard would be that symbol. And it was amazing. So there's Batman, Edward Scissorhands, then came Big Fish and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Tracy mentioned Sweeney Todd. And I mean, there's just been a string of them. He's been closely associated. Yeah, Alice in Wonderland. He's been closely associated with actors like Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter, who I believe at times they were either married or at least partnered.
They were married. They have a couple of kids together.
Yeah, okay.
And Catherine O'Hara shows up in his movies quite a bit.
Yes, absolutely. And then, more recently, there was a sequel to Beetlejuice called Beetlejuice. Yes, it was. Which I did not see, but I need to. And of course,
the reason they made it is because this, brings everything back to this musical brings everything back to consciousness, and all of a sudden, look, we're doing a sequel.
We're going to strike while the iron is hot. Right? So that's the film. And again, I'm not getting into much about it, although we did spend 20 minutes talking about nothing for me to say I'm not going to get into it.
Y'all,
but
that never happens.
That's right. That's what you need to understand. Yeah, never. That's what you need to know, though, so that you understand why when a director named Alex Timbers is approached about directing Beetlejuice as a musical, he has to take a step back. It's a really gigantic thing, right? Mm-hmm. This is not something, it's not like Once, which became a Tony Award-winning musical based on a film that nobody had ever heard of, or The Band's Visit, also, which became a Tony Award-winning musical based on a film that nobody had ever heard of. Yeah. This is a giant film, and it is going to be a giant undertaking. So let me get to Alex Timbers. I talk a lot more about him, and Tracy and I talk a lot more about him in the Moulin Rouge episode. I also write more about him in my book, Jukebox Musicals, in the chapter about Moulin Rouge. So if you want to go a little bit deeper into Alex Timbers' biography, I encourage you to listen to that episode, read that chapter, because I'm just going to take for granted that listeners to this podcast already know a big chunk of his bio. And I'm just going to say here that his first gig on Broadway, his first Broadway credit, was as second assistant director on Jersey Boys. And I mentioned that because our last episode was on Jersey Boys. And so I mentioned that just as a point of connection there. But his second credit in 2010 is for writing the book for and directing a musical called Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson,
which was amazing.
Which was, speaking of an icon, that really became a cult classic.
Well, all of a sudden it was like it reignites this historical musical frame too. Once we got that, it was like, let's show historical figures in a new light. And then what happens after this?
Yep.
we've all heard of this guy named Alexander Hamilton.
He is the ALEXANDER. That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right. So Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, very briefly, is the president, Andrew Jackson, is imagined as the lead singer of a rock group, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the world he's thrown into. So truly a fractured fairy tale retelling of the life of Andrew Jackson. And it was written by Alex Timbers. And directed by, or the book was written by Alex Timbers, and it was directed by Alex Timbers. And it really gets a lot of attention for Timbers because, again, it begins to showcase, just like Burton. Tim Burton had a specific style. Timbers is beginning to showcase that, to connect him even. Go ahead.
They say that in the reviews for Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson. I just remember going, oh my gosh, this is
did they?
Totally
I didn't remember.
Crazy.
I didn't know that.
I remember them saying, they're like, this guy is like honing his style. Like, I know he's young, but this is somebody to watch because there's something iconic in this style that he's creating. So, I mean, I think people knew at that point. The musical itself is very short. It isn't perfect as far as structure is concerned. There are some things that you could probably take issue with, but most people looked at it and they were like, this is something different that we haven't seen. And it's blowing our minds how this man is thinking as a director and as a writer. And it's like, we need to watch what this man does.
And what's interesting is not only does Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson lead to him directing the stage show, which was a one-man show of Pee Wee Herman called The Pee Wee Herman Show, which guess who saw it? Guess who loved it? That would be your girl, Kristin.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was, I squealed like a little 10-year-old girl when Pee Wee Herman walked out on stage. I was so excited. And so he not only directs that one-man show of Pee-wee's, again, connecting him to Burton's work, but we're talking about him being an iconic director. And, I've already mentioned Moulin Rouge, where he was tapped to recreate the cinematic world of another iconic director named Baz Luhrmann, right? Mm-hmm. So, he's stepped into some very big shoes and done it very effectively both of those times. So, at any rate, after the Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson and the Pee Wee Herman Show both premiere on Broadway in 2010, and not long after that, Warner Brothers producer Kevin McCormick sees both of these shows, and of course, not surprisingly, he is very anxious to see how he might collaborate, how he and Warner Brothers might collaborate with Alex Timbers. So they get together, and while they're talking about
that, I'm gonna totally ruin your flow here.
No, you're good.
Warner Brothers at this point is starting this push. Like, they don't have as cohesive a theatrical arm.
It's not Universal, that's for sure.
It's not Universal, but Warner Brothers is like starting to put their feelers out and be like, we are going to be left behind.
That's right.
This is exactly where this, it starts much later than everybody else's. So I'm interested to see what other Warner Brothers titles we start seeing now that they're
right. Well, it's very much like, we talked about Mamma Mia being the one that made people. We talked about this just in Jersey Boys in that episode where, and I'm sure it's come up in others, but where anybody with a catalog of songs says, hey, what can we do with this to make some money? Universal has a huge hit with Wicked, and suddenly everybody's like, whoa. And not just Universal, but also remember Disney's having huge hits on Broadway starting back in 1994 with Beauty and the Beast. And so,
it's about time.
The studios are beginning, all the studios outside of just Disney and Universal are certainly beginning to sit up and take notice. And that's what, obviously, this was a meeting to that end. McCormick, who is a producer for Warner Brothers, says to Alex Timbers, what can we do together? And as they're talking, McCormick suggests Beetlejuice. And Timbers, now let me remind you, now we think of him as having directed Moulin Rouge on Broadway. But then he directed a one-man show on Broadway and a show he'd written, right? Now, he'd certainly been involved in avant-garde theater, to be more specific. Again, listen to the Moulin Rouge episode to learn more about that. But so he was no stranger to creating theater, certainly. But Beetlejuice on Broadway? If you think there's expectations with that, I would say so. Yeah, that was a really big ask.
Yeah,
and go ahead. I'm sorry.
Not only because Timbers is stepping into some iconic, like, directing shoes, but because that character, like, as a director myself, I'd be like, oh, whoever we cast is just sunk.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter what they do. This isn't, like, how do you recreate the iconic?
And not to mention the logistical issues of some of the stage trickery you'd have to be able to do. It's unbelievable to think of. It's an enormous undertaking. And so Timbers says, you know what, give me a few days to think it over. He goes away, thinks it over, and then he comes back to McCormick and he says, I would be willing to approach a Beetlejuice project if a couple of stipulations are met. One is that the story has to be reworked. It cannot be, it can't be an exact retelling. Mm-hmm. It can't be like Back to the Future in a lot of ways tried to do, which was kind of do a point-by-point recreation of the film on stage. They do change some things, but in essence, they really wanted to capture iconic moments on stage, and they did a great job of it.
Doesn't show up until halfway through the movie.
Right.
You can't do that.
I think it was like
Beetlejuice.
I think he's in like it's some absurd number, like 13 minutes of screen time for Beetlejuice in that movie. It's absurd how little he's on the screen, and yet he, that's his movie,
which is great.
Yeah,
but I mean, for a musical, if you call it, like, the fact that he can't,
right,
anyway, like,
right,
he doesn't. There's no, and then it's like, okay.
That's right.
We're going to wait around. Do you think people are going to wait around until the end of the first act to see the title character? Like, that might be weird.
Yep. And that, you know what? I don't know exactly what Timbers was thinking, but that definitely could have played into his thought process too, was just understanding from a dramatic perspective, that's not going to work for a musical, right? But for whatever reason, he said, let's rather than making it a retelling, let's make it like a fan fiction so that we're continuing the story rather than recreating the film. So he decides to take a different approach. And he says, I really think we need to focus on the character of Lydia, who had been played by Winona Ryder on film. Let's really make her the protagonist of this musical rather than Beetlejuice, who had been the protagonist of the film with only 13 or 18 or whatever minutes of screen time. Another thing that he said was, we have to make the house a character unto itself. And so this house, if you've seen the show, it totally transforms into three completely different entities throughout the show. And that was one of those things that was a sticking point for Timbers. He also wanted the effects to be practical, meaning that they were, there was everyday magic happening right before your eyes.
Not just projection.
Right, exactly. Right. They had to be, you could touch and feel it, not just see it.
And that's when you say that to a producer, that's because it's like, that's a money thing.
That is a money thing.
Because it's way cheaper to do this with projection, but
Gobos.
It's not going to work. That will not work, and I won't do that.
That's right. He wanted tangible effects. And then he wanted Beetlejuice to have a relationship with the audience. And we see this in the film as much as you can break the fourth wall in a film, where Beetlejuice is, kind of directly addressing a moviegoer.
Set him up as a narrator so that he can span the whole film or the whole musical, which is what they do.
Yeah, and so Beetlejuice had to have a relationship with the audience, and he had to be able to break the fourth wall.
He needed to be in it more than 13 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So Warner Brother agrees to all of these things. And Alex Timbers sets to work assembling his, Avengers, right? He brings in people that he'd worked with before. One was a man named Scott Brown, who was a former theater critic for New York Magazine. And then Anthony King, who had been the artistic director of the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater Company, which is probably familiar to listeners of this podcast. The three of them had worked together on a musical called Gutenberg the Musical, which some of us recognize from Broadway in 2023, but actually it had been workshopped at the New York Musical Theater Festival in 2005 and then opened off Broadway in 2006. So it had had a long life prior to its Broadway debut in 2023 and was, a very important collaboration of Timbers, Brown, and King. And so they decide, let's get together, let's see what we can do on this Beetlejuice project. And what they really decide, the germ of the idea becomes, let's explore the idea of what if Beetlejuice and Lydia became friends. So again, like I said, we're not retelling the story that's told on film. We're going to continue the story that's told on film. And so they say, what if Beetlejuice and Lydia become friends? And so that was the germ of the idea. And if you know the show, you see how that plays out and where they were able to go with the story. They worked for a while on it without a songwriter. They mapped out the story and would, mark spots where they thought a song should go. But they didn't have a songwriter for a while until they encountered a man named Eddie Perfect.
Which is a great name.
It's a great name. There's something quirky and weird about a name like Eddie Perfect that is perfect, dare I say, for a musical like Beetlejuice. So Eddie Perfect is a songwriter from Australia, and he wanted to write musicals. But you know what Australia doesn't do a whole lot of?
Musicals.
Musical making. Now, having said that, Baz Luhrmann would say, wait a minute, what are you talking about? But I digress. At any rate, there wasn't a whole lot of original musicals being written in Australia. And so he really wanted to work in New York, not surprisingly. But things went very slowly. He was back and forth to Australia, trying to make it on Broadway. And that's when he heard that there was a script for Beetlejuice bouncing around. And so he asked his agent to pitch him for it. And his agent did. Warner Brothers sends him a script, and Perfect says, I'll write 2 songs for free. So basically on spec, they used to call it. I'll write you 2 songs, and you can see if you like it and think it fits what you have, what's your vision for the show. What do you know? He gets the job. So Eddie Perfect comes on board to write some songs. And I will take a moment here to say, Tracey, because you've probably had this experience too, where you have something that you're interested in doing and you do it for free, or you do it inexpensively, you do it for the love of the art. And then what do you know? It turns into something more significant. Yeah. And I think that, I wonder how much that is getting lost nowadays when, things are so, well, for one thing, things are so expensive, so you can't do a whole lot for free. But, I just would encourage anybody who's interested in a career in theater, be willing, even, at a community theater level, to say, hey, let me do this. I just love it. I want to be around it. Let me do it and see where that leads you.
Yeah.
Because it often leads to really good things.
I always think this particular discussion, sometimes I think we need to step back and talk about King Kong.
Let's not. Go ahead.
Another student in King Kong was the standby for the title role, not for the monkey, obviously, for Ann Darrow, I think is the lead woman in that. But so Eddie Perfect actually writes the music for King Kong,
right? And
it's on Broadway starting in 2018, and it runs like an entire year. It doesn't do badly, but it is. People are not impressed with his score.
Yeah.
At all. Like, he gets very, very panned. Like, everybody says that stayed open because of the monkey.
Right. People wanted to see the special effect.
We want to see the ape in that particular case. And so I think part of the reason that he's like, I'll do it on spec, like, this is not somebody who's never written a musical. They have.
That's fair, yes.
And they haven't liked it.
Yep.
So this is something that he is selling.
Give me a shot.
He's having to sell. Just give me a shot. That was, because personally, like the King Kong soundtrack, it just didn't quite work for what they were doing. People wanted something, I think, a little different, a little bit. They just wanted something a little different. He's not a bad songwriter necessarily. Right. It's just matching everything.
It didn't fit with the vibe of King Kong. Yeah. Ironically, King Kong, I believe, starts in Australia in 2013, right? I think it was an Australian musical.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was.
And then it came over here. You're right. No, you're right.
Yeah.
It did. And we were all like, what the heck is happening to Broadway? Like,
since when did Australia start making musicals?
So exactly. he wrote the thing for that. And fun footnote, Eddie Perfect actually, when Beetlejuice goes to Australia, he ends up playing Beetlejuice in
That's
Australia.
right. I forgot about that.
So he is first and foremost an actor and is known as an actor in Australia. So
yeah.
Anyway,
yeah. Thank you for that. So they work. That early 2011, late 2010 is when the conversations begin. It is ready for a world premiere in the fall of 2018, and it has its. Do we call these out of town premieres now?
I think we still do.
Do we still call them that?
It's almost too close to New York. I mean,
it's tricky.
New York at the National Theater, but a lot of them. Mean Girls tried out in the same theater.
A lot of them.
DC.
Yeah.
A year later or something like that. I mean, National Theater is a tryout. That's where we do lots of tryouts, especially if they have big production companies behind them, like Warner Brothers. Yeah. It's not like we're having to, get more support. It's just, is this working or is this not?
Right.
But yeah, I remember when it opened. And
were you in DC at the time or in Maryland?
I was. Maryland. Yeah. Well, we were still going back and forth to Maryland for the company and all of that. I just remember it got panned. It was but I mean, again, they panned Mean Girls too for the same reasons.
Right.
Both of these shows have a lot of words in them. Lots of patter songs. Like, that's the only thing I can really grab onto. It's like in both of the shows, they don't have a lot of kind of the music that sticks in your head and you walk away with whistling. Yeah. But they're making the music do a lot of work. It's almost like it's a patter song. Like, every song is a patter song.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
And it does. It feels like a lot.
Yep. Well, so it premieres in DC in the fall of 2018. And like Tracey said, the reviews are horrific.
It's really bad.
Really, really, really bad. And so the show then undergoes a pretty significant overhaul. I mean, there's a lot of changes that are made between that premiere in, I believe it was October of 18, and when it opens for the first time on Broadway in April of 2019. But it does open in April of 2019 at the Winter Garden Theater. The production cost $21 million, which,
it's about,
honestly, I'm surprised it's not more, given the special
puppets,
exactly. It's an enormous show. I mean, it played the Winter Garden. You have to be a pretty big show to fill that space, right?
That's one of the bigger stages. Like, you
you got to be a big show to fill that. So it opens there, tepid reviews, some were kinder than others.
Kristin, be honest. I'm looking at a review
tell me what you think
here. I was laughing when I was going back and rereading the reviews. The New York Post, Beetlejuice review, musical is a coke snorting, F-bombing disaster. And I was just like, holy moly, that's rough.
Yeah, that is very rough.
New York Theater Review said, what was their title? A Broadway musical adapted from Tim Burton's comic macabre movie, but also, like, right underneath it says, don't bring the kids.
Oh, yeah.
And all of these reviews, even the ones that are tepid, there are some that are just tear it to shreds.
Yeah.
Nothing is memorable. This is, not worth your time, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to say that I don't totally agree with them.
Right.
I found again, we say this every time, like, don't always believe the reviews.
Right.
Because I was struck by how they constructed it. Like, the very first thing that happens in Beetlejuice, you're kind of waiting, because of the anticipation, you're waiting for The Whole Being Dead Thing, which is the second song, not the first. Yeah. And that was the song that they put out for everybody, The Whole Being Dead Thing, where he comes out and talks and is the crazy character. And they start it with Lydia, who's just standing alone on the stage at her mom's funeral and just essentially weeping and talking through her feelings. And you just sit there and you're like, at the end of the very first song, everybody's like, oh gosh, I'm with this kid, this poor kid. And then boom, The Whole Being Dead Thing happens.
Right.
So it's like you go from that to Beetlejuice, and all of a sudden I remember kind of going, oh, I get it. This is Gen X to a T. Right. It's like, oh, pull my heartstring, bam, we're going to hit you with something.
Exactly.
Don't fall in love too quick. Don't do it. Yeah. And, I didn't, yes, the songs are doing a lot of work. Yes, they're very pattery. There's a lot of words. There's, there's a lot of F-bombs. There's a lot of adult material in it, but there's an audience here that they are after, and it's the Gen X audience. And the Gen Xers are just like, woo, let's do this.
Yeah, that's right. More. Right. So as a result of those reviews, there's a very slow start at the box office, as you can imagine. But then something kind of crazy happens. By way of the Tony Awards, the performance at the Tony Awards, it's nominated for 8 Tony Awards. It ends up winning none, but it's nevertheless nominated, which is kind of surprising that it was even nominated given the critical response that it garnered, right?
Yeah.
I know those things don't always sync up, but it is unusual for it to be so panned and then to receive 8, not 1 or 2 for costumes or special effects, but to be 8 Tony Award nominations. That's a significant number.
Yeah.
And even though it wins none, it still gets before a lot of eyeballs on the Tony Award broadcast. And so by way of that, by way of TikTok, most notably in regards to this show, ticket sales begin to pick up, right?
It's because like all of a sudden people were like, oh, I was told it was awful, but now this looks really okay.
It's kind of fun.
Then they go to the theater and get hit with the, I have feelings, and now I'm seeing what was, the crazy stuff that was on TikTok. And then it was just like everybody was like, okay, we got to go see this.
That's right.
It just needed a minute.
It did need a minute. And it's some shows are like that. Carole King, The Beautiful was like that, where it was slow. And then 3 months later, Carole King shows up
and boom.
And suddenly everybody wants to see it. So some shows are like that. And this is certainly one of them. So TikTok, you get people who are, I don't know if at the time it was still Musical.ly or however you pronounce the first version of TikTok when it was, I don't know. Or if it had switched over to TikTok or whatever. But nevertheless, users interacted with the show in a number of ways. One of them would be by dressing up, cosplaying Beetlejuice and the characters and going around New York, going to the show, whatever. And then posting under the hashtag, I think Broadway Beetlejuice was the hashtag. I might be wrong about that, but something similar to that. And, you're interacting with fans in that way. And it was not the first, we never say the first, but it was an early example of the power of social media to turn the tide of a show. And there are many other examples that we could give of that happening, but this is an early one.
Yeah.
Again, not the first, but an early one. And so through the power
they cast really well. And so it was like it had to find its audience.
Right.
If you think about Alex Brightman, who had just gotten off playing
School of Rock.
And School of Rock.
Yep.
It's the same character, right?
Yeah, totally.
And then you've got the little innocent girl who's young, and everybody loved, none of the reviews trashed Lydia.
Yeah.
But just kind of went after Alex Brightman, went after everybody else. Nobody really loved it. But yeah, this is classic. Like, we haven't found our audience yet because our audience didn't. our audiences are the ones that are standing at the TKTS booth. They're not
first run
booth. They're not the first run generation.
That's a great point.
We're still not quite there.
Yeah.
We need the elder millennials.
Right.
Right. And
That's a great point.
And all that. And once they found it, oh my gosh. I mean, I remember the talk about it. It just took
It
off.
totally did. It totally did. But that this is something to add to our longer discussion about the cost of making a musical. Mm-hmm. If you have a show that needs a little bit longer, a little bit more of a runway before it takes off with audiences, with the cost of putting on a show being what it is now, you can't have as long a runway, right? No. And it's not like it needed a hugely long one. It was 3 or 4 months, right? It wasn't a hugely long time, but when production costs are so high, just to run the show is, $1.5 million a week or whatever. What's that?
I mean, Warner Brothers as a producing arm is pretty new at this. I mean, they go on to do, I just looked it up, like The Notebook, and they start doing some of that stuff later on. But yeah, I mean, it's like, did it need more, did it need to do a little loop of shows for a little while to build up that social media presence and then go to Broadway? Because this is something where it's like, once it caught on, it
did.
It goes.
Well, in spite of that, the Shubert organization tells them they're going to have to vacate the Winter Garden Theater in June of 2020. Now, of course, they tell them this well before anybody had ever heard the word COVID.
I think they knew that, though, when they produced.
They knew.
The Music Man had been on the boards for Winter Garden.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
For years. Like, we had been hearing,
I did not know that. Okay.
Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster are coming in this. We're just waiting for his, they were trying to sync up his
shooting schedule,
his film shooting schedule, because he was still doing tons of that. And so it was like, okay, we got to do it when we can do it, and everything was just kind of on pause. So they were like, I gotcha. I didn't realize that. It's a year before they're going to be ready. By all means, jump on in. And they took it, and obviously they didn't know it was going to take off either. They were like, well, we have this thing, let's see what it does. But I don't think anybody expected it to go bonkers.
Yeah.
That quickly.
Well, so when it did go bonkers and they knew that they had to flee the Winter Garden, even pre-COVID,
there were what are those?
Yes, petitions.
There were petitions. We need to stay at the Winter Garden. Don't close Beetlejuice.
Yes. Well, and so there was some finagling, what if we close To Kill a Mockingbird at one theater so that, I guess at the Shubert, so it can move to a smaller theater and we could put Music Man in the Shubert, and there was all this
and it was cracking me up because it wasn't like these were producers having these conversations.
Right.
It was like just general theater going, look, I can solve this problem. Here, we just do this.
Yeah. We can't let this show go.
Musical shows and move people around, and then we'll be okay.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So, there was a lot of love for this show, and fans tried to find a way, as Tracey was saying, to keep it alive. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, it was kind of a moot point because everything closed down for COVID, but then it does come back. I said one of the most fascinating parts of this conversation is its afterlife, which is appropriate for Beetlejuice. And truly, it reopens on Broadway at the Marquis Theater in April of 2022. And again, it runs pretty well. It runs for almost a year. It plays another 300 and some performances at the Marquis, and then is touring at the same time.
So that's a long time. 2 years really is respectable.
In this day and age, for it to have had, it's now got, between its 3 different iterations, it's now at almost 800 performances on Broadway. That's beyond respectable.
We're okay. Yeah.
That's unheard of in this day and age, really, with a new original musical. Not that you know what I mean. No, it is. Yeah, it's original in as much as the story is brand new, right? But it's based on obviously not an original entity. Yeah. But at any rate, the show closes at the Marquee in January of 2023, but it's touring around the country, exciting audiences everywhere. And that's when we have this controversial moment when the tour plugs in a stop at the Palace Theater, which launches as they decide they'll play basically Halloween through the holiday season. And it's a perfect show for that. It's a perfect show for tourists and the theater.
And it's where my girl Sophie gets her Broadway debut.
Yes, and my friend Patrick, he was in that company as well.
And gets to, play Lydia several times on Broadway. And I was like, it was crazy. But here's the thing. The reason it's controversial, which I know we've said on the podcast before.
Yes.
But the reason it's controversial is that they're getting touring money because they did it as a tour stop, not as a Broadway stop.
Right.
And there's some equity's not happy. No one is happy. It's like now they're going to make this a tour stop so they can pay us less so that they don't have to. They're like, but when we come here, then they don't have to give us per diem. Like it just plays with the contract because nobody has ever done this before.
Right.
Like come and sat down on a touring contract for 3 months.
And do we think there could be a world where this becomes the norm?
Well, that's what people are worried about. And that's why equity's like, we have to change the contract. And if you look, you heard our episode with Michael Jablonski and Kim Sava, that's one of the things that they were saying. They were like, the touring contract was meant to protect people when they were going and doing maybe 2-3 weeks at most in one place. Mm-hmm. But when it's 3 months, then once you get past a certain amount of time, then they don't need to take care of your per diem. They don't need to take care of this, that, and the other thing because they're, housing in the same way that they do when you're only going to be there a few days.
Right.
And this is why it's controversial. It's not controversial because people don't want to see it. People want to see it.
Yeah.
It's controversial to the acting community because they're all like, oh. And it seems like this was not something even the touring cast really knew.
Right.
I mean, I remember seeing some of the stuff guys like, well, I guess I'm going to Broadway. And I don't know
right.
if they're just they're good actors,
Yeah, no, I never picked up any. Yeah.
It was just like, I'm going out on tour. Yay.
Yeah.
And then, I guess we're going to Broadway.
Going to Broadway.
And
it's like,
then
it's like waiting
tour?
for Guffman.
Yeah.
We might be going to Broadway.
Exactly.
And really, there they are, and good for them.
Again, I really, really liked this show. I mean, there's a reason that it's had 800 performances on Broadway. There are little hiccups in it that we can always talk about. But really, when it comes down to it, it's really it's fun. It has that nostalgia aspect because we're all kind of hearkening back to childhood when we really thought this kind of humor was funny. And we really did. And I mean, that's, it's loud and it's overwrought in some places, especially when you get Beetlejuice moving. The whole being dead thing is just overwhelming. Like, I mean, it could just be like, oh, I need to turn my hearing aid down because I'm just feeling overwhelmed right now. It can do that to you, but that was the 80s, y'all. It was hair bands and like
ain't that the truth?
Loud music. This is what we love.
That ain't that the truth. Yeah, it's bombastic. It is all of those things.
So
but
don't
it also
avoid it, but bring earplugs.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's important to know, and we've alluded to this before when we've briefly, though we've not had an episode on it, but I know we've briefly mentioned it, shows like Mary Poppins, where it's not Julie Andrews, and you need to know that going in before you see the musical of Mary Poppins. This is the same. Don't go in expecting to see, the Back to the Future approach where they wanted it to look, very much like what was on screen. This was intentionally not what was on screen. So appreciate it as a separate but equal entity and enjoy it.
Yeah, the set and the costumes all very, very kind of different, and then the puppets, the sandworm,
right?
Everybody loves the sandworm.
Yes.
Who knew?
Yep. Yeah, right.
Everybody come to see, like, that's always the thing. I read one review that was like, and at the very end it was like, it was an enjoyable evening at the theater, and the sandworm, period. Like, and just like all the way through it, it was like, you got to come see what they're doing with this.
Yes.
You know, that this is very much, there's a very theatrical and not filmic. And you have to appreciate it as such.
Well, and it's also a chance to see the work of a guy who's, I think, going to be around for a while on Broadway in Alex Timbers. I mean, he's one of those directors. We've talked about others who have had their moments, like Susan Stroman when she was, everybody wanted Susan Stroman for everything. And there have been others throughout Broadway history, how Prince, of course, and, you know, on and on and on, just the iconic people who direct, men and women who direct. But I think Alex Timbers is one of those guys. Yeah. So it's a chance to see his work and, you know, throw in a little nostalgia there as well. And it's a pretty powerful recipe.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, go see it for yourself. We say that all the time. And, you know, once you get through that first song, you'll know what I'm talking about. And as soon as that song is over, this is my favorite part. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, Beetlejuice appears and he says, "Ugh, a ballad already?" And it's like, you know, everybody's like getting all
fourth wall
and like
shattered.
And it's like, oh, this, and then he goes, "Oh, and such a bold departure for the source material." Like, that's his first line, and you're like, I'm gonna have a fine time this evening.
Yes. So. Yes, indeed. I mean, I can't think of anything to add to that. That's very well put. So on that note, we're going to call it a night, and that will do it for this episode of the Dr. Broadway podcast. Tune in for our next episode. We'll be discussing Boop. Until then, you can connect with us via email at hello@drbroadway.com or on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok at Dr. Bway Podcast.